Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 335.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay
All right, ladies
Massey.
and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you're here today because, you know, in light of a lot of the recent events that have happened, some of you may have been considering something. Some of you've been building your business, you've been building your assets, you've got them tied possibly to one country's economy, and because of recent events, maybe you've considered, I wonder what it would be like if I had assets in another country. I wonder what it would be like if I could possibly maybe, you know, have my company be in one country, I live in a different one, and how would that even work anyway? I mean, you may not know this, but individuals like, well, Benjamin Franklin had multiple bank accounts in multiple countries, and it was actually kind of a common practice simply because you never knew which government was going to be there tomorrow. So what does that mean for today's entrepreneur if you're out there trying to build your bigger, better, badder business? Well, I got a guy with me today who's here to help you figure that out. I have with me none other than Bobby Casey. He is the managing partner of Global Wealth Protection. And what's really interesting is that their entire focus is to help you and I internationalize our business, our wealth, and our life. What does that mean? That means, how do I make all of these things and structures work if I want to actually live somewhere other than maybe my native country, or work somewhere other than my native country, or maybe if I want to do that across the entire globe, how do I still function in a day-to-day environment while minimizing taxes as well as asset protection? He's been doing it a while, and what's really important is that you're going to need to take lots of notes. So help me welcome none other than Bobby Casey. Bobby, you there?
I'm here, Jay. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity.
You are quite welcome, sir. And what you are doing, I'm only going to guess that you experience an uptick anytime chaos is in the marketplace. Yes?
Yeah, you'd be surprised, really. It's different types of chaotic events that happen in the marketplace, although it's kind of a masochistic thought. I look at it in the news and I think, oh, cool. Looks like I'm going to have a bunch of new leads in my inbox tomorrow morning. You know, and then it is what it is, right? So,
I get it 100%. Now, this being your first time here, I want to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody when they're here the first time. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. So, you know, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, you know, Black Widow, whatever. You get the idea, because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, occasionally we entrepreneurs, we wake up and we think we're wearing a cape and tights and we're flying around and saving people in various ways with our products and services. But also, like superheroes, entrepreneurs have a beginning. I mean, think about it. Peter Parker, before he was Spider-Man, all he was trying to do, he's just a college student and trying to scrape by taking some photos. He was just trying to make it happen, whatever it was at the time. So what we want to know is, before you and your multiple undergraduate degrees, before, I mean, a minor in Russian, I think that's intriguing in and of itself. Before doing business internationally yourself and helping others do the same, what we want to know is, who is Bobby Casey?
Okay. Yeah, that's. I'm glad you brought up the superhero reference. Me and my 9-year-old son last night were watching Green Arrow. So
yes,
good timing. Unfortunately, I did not come from Green Arrow's billionaire background.
No Queen consolidated in your past.
There's no Queen consolidated in my past, and There's also no Batman backstory there, no billionaire parents who owned Gotham City either. So I did come from an entrepreneurial family, though. My grandpa owned a chain of barbecue restaurants. My dad owned a construction company and real estate development. So they did okay. But I've always been an entrepreneur. I was never in that track of, get good grades and go to college and get even better grades so you can get that corporate job. That was never, I mean, I'm sure my parents would have been fine if that's the path I took, but it was never pushed in that direction. So, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life. I mean, I'm 42. I haven't had a job since I was 19. And I can't really remember that long ago that well, but I'm pretty sure I was fired from the job when I was 19. So
I like that one. Yes.
I mean, like a lot of entrepreneurs, you're probably the same, Jay. We're pretty much unemployable, right? We would make really horrible employees because, we don't want to comply. We don't want to fit in a mold. We don't want to fit in a box, right? So we're too independently thinking in most cases to make good employees. I'm 100% sure right now, if I weren't an entrepreneur, I'd be homeless because nobody would hire me or they would fire me quickly. So, but as far as backstory, I like I said, I've always been an entrepreneur. I remember, mowing yards and doing that kind of thing as a teen. My first real business I started when I was 21, believe it or not. I was assembling bicycles for Walmart, and that business did fairly well. Kind of a weird backstory, but anyway, I ended up getting a vendor account with Walmart as a service vendor, assembling bicycles for Walmart stores, and I was 21 when I started that. And we did a bit over $1 million in revenue in the third year. In our third year. So not a big business, but when you're 24 doing $1 million in revenue and you're not a computer programmer tech whiz that just invented, Facebook or something, then that's kind of a big deal. And it was anyway. And that business did fairly well over the years. I bought a couple of my competitors in that marketplace. We ended up becoming more of an installation company. We have like a national contract with Sears. If you would have bought a pool table at Sears and, when you go to the checkout counter and they say, would you like that installed in your home for you?
Right.
There was about a 70% chance it was one of my installers that would have come to your house years ago. That was one of our accounts. We did business with Dick's Sporting Goods, Sports Authority, a few other chains doing all types of installations. But I did that for a while. I ended up selling that company. Before I even sold it, I hired a management team to run it because, quite frankly, I hated the business, hated my customers, and hated my employees. So I thought, I probably need to do something different. Yeah, so over the years, I built up, let's say, a fairly sizable amount of assets. I had owned a restaurant, I owned a bunch of commercial and also some residential property. And this was back in, I guess, early 2000s. And I thought, I'm kind of exposed. I'm exposed from a litigation standpoint. I'm also paying an insane amount of money in taxes. And, to rewind a little bit, my dad, coming from an accounting background, but running a construction and a real estate development business, our kind of dinner time talks were about company structure and tax planning and tax minimization and those sorts of things. These are the kind of talks we had when I was 15 years old at dinner, and that stuff intrigued me. So in my own business, I started thinking, like I owned all these properties in my own name. I owned a restaurant. I owned this other business. Think about doing some things. And I ended up meeting a guy, actually out in your neck of the woods, guy in California, who I hired him as a consultant to help me develop an asset protection structure for myself, domestic planning. because at that time I wasn't really that involved in any type of international stuff. But I hired this guy, and I was incredibly intrigued by the business, the problem-solving aspect of the business, and we became friends. And just getting to know him and understanding who his customers were became incredibly interesting to me. The whole aspect of working with entrepreneurs and investors and helping them solve problems, right? I'm very much a pro-entrepreneur, pro-investor mentality. And from an economic standpoint, I think investors and entrepreneurs are the ones that drive the global economy. So from my perspective, the more money that stays in the hands of the entrepreneurs and the investors, the better everybody does, right? So after getting to know this guy over time, he kind of became my mentor, and I started doing some sideline consulting on the topic, on this asset protection topic. And I had a lot of friends they're business owners and different types of fields. And so I had a lot of friends saying, "Hey, can you help me do what you did?" And so that's kind of how it got started. And, that was me first poking my head down the rabbit hole, so to speak. And, after that, I got heavily, I started doing a lot of international travel with my mentor. We started looking at some different offshore structures and different types of things like that. And, at this point, I've owned companies in, I think, 6 or 7 different countries. I think I've traveled to 70 or 80 countries at this point. I've lived in half a dozen different countries. So I'm definitely living the example, so to speak, on internationalizing your business, your wealth, and your life.
Indeed. I can imagine that your passport is well used.
Yeah, I always have to renew my passport with the double pages. I have to renew it before it expires because I do eat up the pages rather.
That's awesome. Okay, so I've got a question though. You have a lot of not what I would consider to be non-traditional things, or I think a lot of people would consider to be non-traditional things, but yet you have 2 undergraduate degrees? Was that just for fun?
I have two undergraduate degrees and 1 master's. And if I ever get around to writing my thesis statement, I'll have my law degree as well.
Okay. So this is a hobby, what you do in your spare time? I mean, I find that interesting.
Believe it or not, kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm a huge believer in education. Sure. Now, honestly, I can't say I'm a huge believer in formal education, although I do recognize I sound like a hypocrite there. But I'm not a huge believer in formal education for the wrong reasons, let's say. I'm not a huge believer in the 18-year-old kid getting out of school and going for a liberal arts degree because his parents made him and he's just lazy and decides to take the easiest path to a bachelor's degree. But if you've got some life experiences, maybe you're 22, 24, 25, whatever, and you say, I'm really interested in, I don't know, economics, and you go back and get an economics degree. If you're doing it because it's interesting to you, I believe in that. If that makes sense. I mean, I'm a huge reader too. I probably read, 3-4 books a month. So I'm a big believer in all types of education done for the right reasons.
Got it.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it does. It just struck me as odd because normally there's absolutely nothing to do with that formal side. But and that's why I said, is it a hobby? Because that's the only thing that's the only kind of rationale that could make sense. I'm like, maybe he just has a genuine interest in these things, and therefore that's what he does with his free time. Which, okay, in that sense, it makes sense, and I get it, I totally get it. Now, I guess my question would be though, as you've had time to evolve. All the way from, assembling bicycles and installing pool tables and all of these things, you've evolved into understanding very, very clearly why it would be advantageous for someone to either hold assets, have a business, etc., in multiple different jurisdictions and countries. So for those of us who may not have had the time to evolve or just the understanding, what would you say is the basic reason internationalization makes sense?
There's not a basic reason. I call it geo-arbitrage. Some people call it a multi-flag strategy. I can better explain some of this stuff with stories if you don't mind.
Sounds great.
So let's take the entrepreneur, for example, who lives in Kansas, owns a house in Kansas, his bank account's in Kansas. Maybe he's got some rental properties in Kansas and family, everything. He's very geocentric to, let's say, Kansas City, for example, right?
Okay.
He doesn't have any diversification outside of that geography. Now he might be, let's say he has a plumbing business and he's got 7 or 8 rental houses as a side. So he's diversified a bit economically. Maybe he's got a stock portfolio invested in S&P 500 index funds or something. He's diversified a little bit in that way, but there's some other issues there. One, all of his assets are tied up in U.S. dollar denominated assets. So you're very heavily relying on the rise and fall of the U.S. dollar, which over the past couple of years would have been great. But we all know, currencies tend to ebb and flow. And,
right.
Ultimately, if you look back at the U.S. dollar in general, over the past 100 years, it's lost an enormous amount of value.
It ebbs and flows down.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows down. But I guess what I mean in the past couple of years, it's gone up in value relative to, let's say, the euro or the pound or, the Swiss franc or something like that. So, from a currency standpoint, it's been a strong relative currency for the past, couple of years. But you're tied up in dollar-denominated assets. Maybe you've got all your rental properties in Kansas. Well, you're exposed geographically to one. What if you're, I don't know enough about Kansas City. It's just an example. But let's say some big factory that employs 10,000 people goes out of business, and all of a sudden now you lose half your tenants.
Right.
The local economy itself collapses. Well, that could affect your local plumbing business. It could affect your rental house business. Maybe your local bank collapses. Of course, you have FDIC insurance, but there are some problems there. I had a bank. I had some money in a bank years ago, I guess 2008 or 9, that did collapse. And yeah, I got my money back out, but it took them like 6 months before I ever saw the money. If you had all your money tied up in one bank and that bank collapses and you can't touch your cash for 6 months, well, it's kind of hard to pay rent and buy macaroni and cheese if you can't touch your money, right?
And I do like macaroni and cheese, by the way.
Well, then you, my friend, need to consider a diversification strategy.
Exactly, because I got to protect my right to have macaroni and cheese. I totally understand. Totally understood. Yes. Okay. What are some of the other reasons that people come to you and say, you know what, is it anything? Let me say this differently, because it's easy to I think to take the position of, if you are afraid of this happening, then you should be internationalizing. Are there any reasons that are not fear-based that go, yeah, internationalization is what I want to do?
Okay, Jeff, I think I got your question here. So in my last example, it's more of a fear-based example of the guy in Kansas who is tied to his U.S. dollar-based assets, and he's tied to that local economy and needs to think about diversification. But before I go to answer your non-fear-based rationale, let me add on here just a little bit. This guy, and this kind of leads in, let's call it a lead in here to the next step. But this guy just taking some simple steps, for example, properly structuring his business, properly structuring his asset holdings, can minimize his litigation risk, first of all, because living in Kansas, owning assets in Kansas, business in Kansas, so on and so forth. He has this litigation risk, but taking some simple steps like properly structuring his business and his assets and that sort of thing, he can dramatically minimize that risk, which of course means then he's more in the driver's seat if he gets sued. And, we always have these slip and fall type examples, people suing you for getting hurt on their property, that sort of thing. These are things you really need to consider, but also just by the simple fact of diversifying geographically, he can take advantage of other opportunities as well. So right now I'm focusing strictly on a financial or an investment perspective, but somebody like this guy in Kansas, he could say, you know what, maybe I need to think about, investing some of my assets in, I don't know, we'll just use it as an example, Costa Rican,
coffee.
Vacation.
Okay,
coffee.
All right, sure.
Costa Rican coffee. That's a good example. So I could invest it in a Costa Rican coffee farm. By that simple action of investing in a Costa Rican coffee farm, he's now, well, actually, you're still U.S. dollar-based investments because Costa Rica is more or less on the U.S. dollar. But
you pick the country.
Maybe it's not a great example. Let's go Colombia.
Colombia it is. And now we're really going coffee.
Now we're definitely going coffee. I've had a few clients that have coffee farms in Colombia, actually. But so let's say you invest in a Colombian coffee farm, for example. So now you're in a different currency. You're in a Colombian peso. You diversified outside of your home base currency. You've diversified into another geography that's outside of your home U.S. court system. So back to the slip and fall incident. You get sued. Somebody gets hurt. They go to sue you. Well, if your assets are in Colombia, that's a significant roadblock for a local lawsuit, right?
I see. Yeah.
A Kansas court cannot attach an asset in Medellin, Colombia, Antioquia, Colombia.
Right.
And Antioquia. Gosh, I can't even pronounce it. Antioquia, Colombia. They can't attach assets in that state of Colombia. It's outside of their legal jurisdiction. So from a litigation standpoint, you're protecting a piece of your wealth by holding it in a different country outside of the country where you live. Because if you don't live in Colombia, it makes it extremely hard for you to get sued there because guess what? You're not there to actually have any negative action against you, right? Of course, there could be some activity that happens on your farm but that is what I call an internal risk or a localized risk related to the property itself. So anyway, that's a whole different topic. But from a more positive standpoint, by diversifying, you take advantage of other currencies. I am going to use Colombia as an example right now because actually from a currency diversification standpoint, the Colombian peso is a very good option. About a year and a half ago, the Colombian peso was about 1,800 pesos to the dollar. Today, it's about 3,000 pesos to the dollar. Now, the reason that is because Colombia is a very heavily based resource economy. If you track the Colombian peso, it almost mirror images the Canadian dollar. And we know Canadian dollar is a very resource-based economy with, oil and metals and minerals and that sort of thing. So the Colombian peso very much mimics the Canadian dollar because Colombia is also a very heavily resource-based economy. Believe it or not, one of the biggest exports from Colombia is oil. And so whenever oil prices are down, the Colombian peso goes down. Right now, oil's around $45 a barrel, something like that. Last I checked. Well, a year and a half ago, where was oil? It was around $80 a barrel?
Well,
70 something?
Every time I went to the pump, I felt it. But yes, it was more for sure.
Well, if you look at some of the geopolitical and also the macroeconomic things related to oil prices, I can't imagine, short of a massive economic collapse, I can't imagine oil prices going to $20 a barrel. I mean, they might go to 35 or something like that, but that'd be crazy, really, to see oil prices go that low again. Not to say it can't happen, but the point is, right now in Colombia, with about a 3,000 to 1 peso to the dollar, really a 20% movement in the peso takes it back down to 2,400 pesos to the dollar. But that means your asset value grew by 20% just from a currency movement.
Right. As measured in the U.S. dollar is what you're saying.
As measured in U.S. dollars.
Yeah,
right.
Totally understood. Okay, so there's an opportunity for economic gain as well, not just avoiding something negative. Okay, guys. One of the interesting things about investing in many different places is that there are many different reasons to do so. So as you can hear, there are reasons to avoid problems, and there are still opportunities abroad. What am I saying to you? I'm saying not every market operates efficiently yet. And because of that, sometimes all we need is access to that market in order to make an opportunity ours. And often that means looking outside your country. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, if you want other ideas about how to make more opportunity yours, feel free to go to cashflowdiary.com/free book. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/free book. Pick up a copy of my book, Cashflow Diary, 10 Steps to Creating Wealth in Any Economy. Last time, go to cashflowdiary.com/free book. Let's get back to the rest of the story.
There is a huge opportunity for economic gain. Also, another thing to mention is if you're tied up in U.S. dollars, I think, yeah, it's like I said, the past couple of years, it's been a good idea to be in U.S. dollars. I would hate to have been all in Colombian pesos 2 years ago and have to convert it all to U.S. dollars now. But going the opposite way now is a pretty good idea. You have to kind of keep an eye on the way these markets move. For example,
what I was going to say is that because when I'm listening to you talk, there's so many. There's something to be said for the person who's lives in Kansas, works in Kansas, business in Kansas, investments are in Kansas. It's easier to maintain, manage, etc. But once you go, beyond. You're not in Kansas anymore. Once you go beyond that, it seems like there's so much more work involved. It is in just managing and maintaining and knowing when to move, when not to move, and what to do. How is one supposed to keep track of all of these things?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. It's really not that difficult. And I kind of compare it to banking. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, you and I would have frequently gone to our local bank, right?
Right.
We make our deposits, we pull cash out,
right.
That sort of thing. When's the last time you went to a local bank?
I try not to go. I do my best. But
you never go to a bank.
Right.
Most people don't go to a bank, right? They get on their phone, they send their payments through their app.
Yep.
They log into their online banking on the computer.
Yep.
And technology has really afforded us the ability to be able to do things that were, if not impossible 20 years ago, they were a heck of a lot harder 20 years ago.
Right.
And same thing, like let's say you own property in Colombia. There's property managers. Same thing. If you lived in California and you happen to have property in Nevada, are you managing it yourself? Not likely.
I hope
you
not.
You probably have property managers anyway, don't you?
Yeah. So you're basically, what you're getting at is that there's systems because of technology today. You're saying doing this type of work is simpler. It's not impossible. It's not without effort, but it's still simpler than it would have been, say, in Benjamin Franklin's time when he was doing it.
Well, yeah, for sure. But actually, what I'm saying is doing these things is actually no more difficult than being geocentric in Kansas City.
Oh, okay. So you're going one step further. You're saying you're doing the same amount of effort we're already expending is what's required. We could just have more benefits to accrue to ourselves if we would just take some time to understand some of the benefits of internationalizing our business, wealth, and life.
Setting some of these things up in advance takes work, energy, effort, money, whatever. It takes some effort to get it done. But once you have it set up in place, it requires no more effort than it does to sit on your couch in Kansas City and get on your laptop.
Well, but what about, and now I'm playing devil's advocate for those listening, what about the idea of, because there's something to be said, if I want to go get some money, I can go down to the bank. How is it that simple? I mean, if my bank's we've been picking on Colombia, but if my bank's in Colombia, is it as still that simple just to go to the ATM and get money?
You can just stick your Bank of Colombia bank card in your local Wells Fargo ATM machine and punch the number, however much money you want to pull out. It's going to spit the money out.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Then this leads to what would be the obvious question. Why aren't more Americans or individuals internationalized then? What is the hurdle that keeps us from doing these things? And what is it that global wealth protection can do to help us overcome this hurdle? Because I'm hearing benefits, but I'm beginning to understand, like, well, then why isn't it? What's the hurdle? Why is it not happening more?
Jay, why do most Americans work a 9-to-5 job?
I'm still trying to figure that one out. Other than, but that's what they were told to do.
Exactly. So it's all a matter of perception versus reality, right? There's all kinds of huge benefits. Now we can take this a step further if you want as well.
By all means.
On the internationalization strategy. For example, let's say you actually don't want to live in Kansas anymore. Now you say, you know what? I really want to live in Colombia. We're going to keep picking on Colombia.
Okay, let's switch to Belize. I would rather live in Belize now. Now we're moving to Belize.
Okay. Have you been to Belize and Colombia?
I've been to...
Because I used to live in Belize. There's no way I would live in Belize over Colombia, but we can run with it.
Okay, well, I've been to Ambergris Cays, but I didn't spend a lot of time on the mainland in Belize. But yeah, no, I have not been to Colombia. But I'm listening. She's like, there's no comparison. You don't understand. Colombia's where to go. I'm just trying to. I don't want anyone to think like we're picking on Belize for any particular reason, and I want them to see that it doesn't really matter the country that we're choosing.
I actually have an office in Ambergris Cays. It's funny you say that, but
okay.
I've been there. That's where I used to live for a while too. But so Ambergris Cays is nice for like holiday. I couldn't imagine wanting to live there. But anyway, so okay, we can pick Belize. Let's say you want to live in Belize. You want to live in Ambergris Cays. You want to, go to the same 3 bars every week over and over and over again.
Yes, it's small. Yes, it is small. You got that right. Hey, but they got 4G Wi-Fi. That's all that matters now.
They do have 4G on the island. Belize Telecom has 4G on the island now. So let's say you want to live in Belize. Okay?
Yes.
You go there. It's relatively easy to get residency in Belize, especially if you own property. But It's actually not that difficult if you just rent an apartment or a condo or something there also. But it's relatively easy to get residency there. So now, as an American living in Belize with residence status in Belize, you can claim in the U.S. what's called the foreign earned income exclusion. And as a bona fide, so there's 2 ways to qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion. You either have to be physically out of the U.S. 330 days in a 12-month period, and that can be prorated based on when you leave for the first time. Or the second option is you become a bona fide resident of another country. So in this case, you're becoming a bona fide resident of Belize. As an American, there are actually 2 ways to qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion. The first way to qualify is what they call the physical presence test. You got to physically be outside of the U.S. 330 days in a 12-month rolling period, and that's proratable depending on when you leave the country for the first time. The second way to qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion is to become a bona fide resident of that foreign country. So in this example, it's really easy to get residency in Belize. Once you get your residence card and you become an actual bona fide resident in Belize, then you can qualify under what's called the physical presence test. That physical presence test, actually, you get a lot more leeway on how much time you can be in the U.S. because from a tax base or a tax home standpoint, Belize has now claimed you as, a tax resident. So the U.S. kind of somewhat relinquishes control over your tax status. Now, what that gets you, that foreign earned income exclusion, what that actually buys you or gets you is your first 100,000 approximately. It goes up a little bit every year by a few $100, but for 2015, I think it was just like 101,000. But it gets you $100,000 in tax-free earned income. Plus, if you structure your business properly, you can get about a $50,000 housing allowance tax-free. So essentially what that means, if you have your company pay you a, quote, salary of $100 plus a $50,000 housing allowance, you can earn that money tax-free as a resident in Belize. Now, there's a couple of side benefits that nobody really talks about, but you need to properly structure your business so that your income actually is derived from a non-U.S. corporation. We do most of all offshore companies for our clients in Anguilla. So, for example, if you had an Anguilla company that's where your, quote, paycheck came from, you actually would also avoid having to pay any self-employment tax. So that's the 15.3% on your first $118,000 in salary. So that's about $18,000 in self-employment tax you could avoid. And I just had this conversation with somebody else this morning, so kind of fresh on my mind. But also, if you are an expat taking advantage of the foreign earned income exclusion, you're also exempt from the Affordable Care Act. So you don't actually have to pay these exorbitant insurance premiums, and you don't have to pay these exorbitant insurance premiums, and you don't have to pay that. What's the fine now or the penalty? It's like something like $2,500, I think.
On its way to a firstborn child, but yeah, got it. Totally understood.
Yeah, exactly. You are way too close there, but I'll give you, and this will blow your mind. So I live in Europe. This is my primary home. I just paid about a month ago, I had to pay my insurance premium for the year, because in order for me to qualify for my resident status in Europe, you have to have a health insurance policy so that you're not like on their social program or whatever you want to call it. So as a foreigner, you have to have your own health insurance. So I'd pay for the minimum health insurance plan that's required for me to live there. And it's a high deductible healthcare plan. It's something like somewhere around, I think it's a 10 or 12,000 euro deductible. I pay out of pocket everything on that up to that point, but anything over that, they cover everything. You want to take a guess how much I pay for health insurance?
Oh, man. How many people? Just you?
Just me.
$100.
That'd be overpriced. I actually pay 38 euros per year.
Okay. I was trying to be ridiculous, but thank you for making your
even
point.
More ridiculous.
Thank you for making your point. Okay.
So just those things, if you think about it like that. So hypothetically speaking, you make $150,000 a year right off the bat. You're saving. Let's say you're at a 30% tax bracket, right? So 30% of 150 is 45,000 plus 18,000 in self-employment tax. Add in your $2,000 penalty for not paying for health insurance in the U.S. You're what, 65,000 in tax. So just by becoming a foreign resident,
wow,
you save 65,000 a year in this kind of simplified example.
Got it. Okay, so. Then here's where we are. I mean, because there's a lot of things it sounds like there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle that only make sense by working them together. And I think it would be an almost insurmountable task for the average person to try to actually even try to do this on their own. So I'm just going to flat out ask, what's going to be the best way for those of us listening to go, you know what, I need to hang out with Bobby a little bit, maybe, get some material so that it can get me started and sit down and talk to you guys.
Okay. So we offer a lot of different things for our clients. I mean, it kind of depends on what stage you are in your own process. So if you go to our website, globalwealthprotection.com, you can just subscribe to our free newsletter. You can get our articles. We put out a couple pieces of content every week. That would be one thing, just to kind of stick your toe in the water and just kind of get a feel for how we function, how we operate. You can subscribe to our newsletter on the right-hand side there. For our clients that are actually serious about internationalizing their business, their wealth, and their life, we have a membership program. It's gwpinsiders.com, and members have access to all of our content. We have some articles, webinars, some video presentations, and different topics. Where to get second passports, the best second citizenship opportunities in the world, residency in different countries. I've got one coming out, actually, residency and investment opportunities in Colombia. I've also got something coming out about residency opportunities and investments in Georgia, the country, not the state.
Yes.
And so those types of things, but members also get free consultations, which is very valuable because we can sit down on the phone and discuss step by step your situation, because it is a very personalized approach. I mean, no two people have the same type situation. This is not like one of these info products to teach you how to create Facebook ads, right? I mean, it's a very personalized project for each individual person. And so members get free consultations and also discounts on other services like registering companies. And then, as we discussed before, if you want me to mention it now, we did write an article that might be interesting for your listeners who some of this stuff appeals to them, but maybe they just really want to protect their privacy. They just want to kind of regain a bit of their anonymity in their daily life and their daily business dealings. I wrote an article called How to Go Off the Grid Without Leaving Your Couch. You can find that article at globalwealthprotection.com/cashflow diary. And that article, it took me many years to figure out the steps behind how that process works. But basically, the idea is public databases collect all of your information, and they collect it from a lot of different places. And what you provide as your public information is what ends up in those databases. And I wrote this piece basically as a step-by-step guide on how to properly provide those databases the information you want known, which essentially gives you the ability to go off the grid from a public record standpoint. And I think that's critically important in today's overly connected world. It helps you kind of at least regain some piece of your privacy.
Yeah, totally understood. So as we wrap up here, I have a question for you, because I'm curious to think or to know what your answer is going to be. I mean, there's a number of, would-be entrepreneurs or people who are, either looking to leave their job or in various stages. Let's just say that there's someone standing in front of the superhero outfit store right now, and they think they want to, put on that cape, man. They think they want to do this thing, but, they're dealing with, that voice in the back of their head. And I know that voice. It's that voice that comes to us every time we try to do something great. Every time we think we want to be bigger, better, badder. It's that voice that comes up and And unfortunately for some people, they're actually related to that voice. So they have to deal with it. My question to you is, with all the wisdom, all the experience and things that you have done, let's pretend that you're talking to that person directly right now, and they've already made the commitment that they're actually going to follow through on what you were about to say, and they're going to do it within the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you tell them to do?
Wow. To follow through in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Correct.
The only thing I can really say to that is make the decision to really do something for yourself. If you're a 9-to-5 kind of person, and this has been your whole life, you were raised in that model, go to school, get the education, get the job, I would tell that person, make a decision now to start your own business of some kind. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's selling your favorite local bar of soap on Amazon, right? Your local handmade grandma's bars of handmade soap on Amazon. Stick your toe in the water, get your foot wet, and figure out how to be this autonomous, independent person where you're not relying on your boss or your company, or some politician to make decisions and impact your life in a positive way. Take control of it yourself. If you're that 9-to-5er, do something about it. Don't go back to work tomorrow and say, "Oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, maybe I'll do something about it one day." If you aren't so entrepreneurial in that mindset, then I would say the next alternative, and I don't necessarily say one's any better than the other. I think people should be doing both. But the other alternative would be to start investing in something that produces cash flow. I'm a huge believer in, and I know this is like your whole show concept, your whole business concept, but I'm a huge believer in cash flow producing assets. I used to be heavily involved in the stock market. I went deep into the stock market in 2008 and 9 at the crash of the market, but I'm completely out now. I don't want anything to do with the stock market now. I mean, don't like, if you're sitting there listening, I'm going to take action today. God, I really don't feel like selling grandma's soap on Amazon. That's just not me to go out there and build a business. Fine. It's not you. Go buy a rental house. Go find a fourplex or a duplex and start building an investment portfolio like that way. I got a nephew. He's 31 years old. He's, over the past few years, he's just slowly built duplexes. He has 8 duplexes now, 16 units. He's 31 years old with 16 units that are 100% rented. Once he pays off his mortgages, that's his, as he calls it, that's his personalized 401k plan.
Right.
So, taking action is critically important. So now that I have thought through that process, if I really had to give you the one thing I would do in the next 24 hours, I think you'll appreciate this. Now that because you kind of threw this on me and I didn't know that was coming. So
good.
Let me tell you, the one thing I would do right now, literally not in the next 24 hours, I would do it in the next 20 minutes.
Okay.
Is I would walk over to the wall. I would unplug my TV from the wall. I would unhook it off the wall, and I'd go throw it in the nearest dumpster.
Wow. Love it. And that's something that they can do.
Because the TV eats your freaking time.
Wow.
It is a huge consumer of time. Even if you're going to come home at work at 6:00 and not take action on your business, guess what? Books or playing with your kids or going on a walk, or exercising for half hour or an hour. But the worst thing in the world you can do is drop on the couch and press the on button, right? So.
Got it. Totally. I love it. And I definitely appreciate you being raw, real, and just saying exactly what you're thinking, because that's what it's going to take that's what it took to wake me up. That is people willing to say those types of things. And what's really awesome is that you're out there doing it. You're making what is a complicated path very simple for people. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge, insight, and wisdom here with us at the Cashflow Diary.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks, man.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? That means, well, it's time for you to actually make it happen. You've thought about doing business in other countries. You've thought about asset protection. You've thought about all of these things. And if you're like me, when he told you how much his health insurance was, you're like, dude, I got to do something. Well, do something. When? Now. Because now is all you've got, and you knew that already. Anyway, it's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.